Sarah, we were super excited to see her. Actually, I'm the Instagram stalker of TIDC, and I came across her, and we're so excited. She's been with us, coming here today with us. We're just over the moon. Sarah's from the Curated House, it's her company, and she's joining us to share some of the health hijacking dangers. I love that term. Hidden in so much of what we put in our homes and what we can do about it. Internationally published, this Toronto designer is known for her approachable yet sophisticated and luxurious design projects. She's also known as the canary in the design mines for her intuitive ability to sniff out hidden toxins in furnishings and finishes. As an expert in healthy and sustainable design, Sarah is a passionate advocate for interior designers, leveraging their role of lifestyle architect to design homes that are as healthy as they are beautiful. And we know firsthand, she's certainly attested to this work with Christine Dubby, as one of our friends of TIDC as well. Always thinking about the intersection between a healthy, beautiful home and a healthy, beautiful life. She is also launching a new, very unique course this week called the Dwelling Well Healthy Bedroom Design Virtual Masterclass. This 8-week course is for both designers and homeowners alike who want to learn about health hijacking hidden toxins in interiors and how to remove them while maintaining the aesthetic integrity of good design. So we're gonna move on. Sarah, I'm gonna make you co-host now, and you can pull up your presentation.
Well, while you're doing that, Darylyn, I just want to thank you so much for the invitation to be here with you today. It's such a privilege to speak to our community, our design community, and to share my personal and professional journey and my passion. So let me give this a try and see if I can share my screen with everyone here and get into presentation mode hopefully fairly quickly.
Awesome. If you have questions throughout, please add to the Q&A or the chat as we did in the last session, and we will address them at the end. I'll help monitor them.
Excellent. It's moving a bit slowly, but it's loading, and here we are in presentation mode. So Darylyn, thank you so much for that kind invitation, and again for having me here as a part of the Toronto International Design Center community. I'm very grateful for the opportunity to share with everybody today. So as Darylyn mentioned, I have a funny nickname, and I've been a designer for about 16 years, and I actually garnered the nickname, the canary in the design mines, very early on in my career. I remember going into the carpet showroom that I had been in a number of times, and the supplier there turning to me and saying, "You're like a canary in the design mines." And the reason he said that was because I had these visceral, intuitive reactions and could very intuitively identify the products that had hidden toxins in them in any given showroom that I was walking into. And this wasn't just some sixth sense, so to speak. I was actually having true physical reactions to things. So I would get dizzy or nauseous or suddenly have joint and muscle pain, or extreme fatigue would hit me. And gratefully, I was in tune enough with my body to recognize that there was something in my environment that was triggering these reactions. Those reactions led me to do deep dive research very early on in my career. And lo and behold, I discovered that my body was in fact a very accurate barometer of hidden toxins. It also led me to affirm what my intuition was already telling me, which is that unfortunately, similar to the beauty industry and the fashion industry, the home and design and construction industries aren't well regulated to guard and protect our health. So that is how I organically followed a path to becoming an expert in healthy and sustainable interiors, and why I have that nickname today. I mentioned that the fashion industry, the beauty industry are similar to the design industry, and some of you might be familiar with this story, but I want to share it with you as an example of how much we as consumers and very much as designers need to be aware and conscious and asking a lot of probing questions about the products that we are specifying for our projects. So some of you may have seen this in the news. Back in 2018, a lawsuit came out. It had been kept under wraps for a couple of years, very tightly under wraps for a couple of years. But what happened was American Airlines issued a new design for their uniforms. And very shortly after issuing these new uniforms, there were extreme reactions taking place in thousands of their employees. Everything from, autoimmune conditions that were literally being triggered overnight, to asthma, to all kinds of severe reactions on an allergic spectrum. There were cases of people who were on flights getting nosebleeds, and even one scenario where a flight attendant was holding a guest's baby and the baby immediately broke out in rashes. So they did obviously some research. The employees were up in arms about the situation and discovered that it was actually toxic chemicals that were used to finish the fabrics of these uniforms that were triggering these severe reactions. And so I share that story to say that, this is a major American corporation. They are sourcing their uniforms from a major supplier again, and this shouldn't be possible. It shouldn't be that all of these people's health was so significantly compromised by these uniforms, and yet this is what's happening. And I would say that the same is true, that it shouldn't be possible that the objects, the finishes and furnishings that we are filling our projects with and filling our own homes with should not be able to have a negative impact on our health, but unfortunately they can. I want to share my philosophy of beauty that I've come to through my journey in design and in my own health. And ultimately, it's a three-legged stool. And that philosophy is that in order for a product to be truly beautiful, it should be healthy for the planet, healthy for the people making it, and healthy for the people living with it. And I'll be honest, we have a lot of room to grow in our industry when it comes to checking all of these boxes. I travel to, the largest furniture shows in the world, and I'm asking questions all the time of fabricators and manufacturers and product developers. And we have a lot of room to grow. So within that, I do think we have to embrace a mindset of progress over perfection. We have to avoid hypervigilance and fear, but at the same time, it's so, so important that we educate ourselves and that we drive forward towards positive change. I do believe that as designers, we are lifestyle architects. And so it's our job to get inside the minds of our clients, to understand their dreams and goals and desires and how they live in a space. And ultimately, we edit their ideas and their taste and reinterpret and create things that honestly, most of the time, they can't imagine. And that space that we create, particularly obviously in residential design, that space that we are creating is the backdrop for their lives. It should be a nurturing context for them to make memories with their loved ones. And so I believe that we are very responsible as designers, as lifestyle architects, to ensure that we're not only creating spaces that are visually beautiful, but will nurture them living healthy, happy, beautiful lives. So I want to share a stat with you, and that is the World Health Organization actually says that 19% of the factors that influence our health and well-being come from our interiors. They come from our built environment. Putting that another way, 1/5 of our potential health and well-being is actually wrapped up in our built environment. And now that we are spending more time at home than we ever have before, we were already spending 90% of our time indoors. But now we're at home. We're at home and we are constantly exposed to whatever it is that might be in our indoor air quality. And the issue is that actually we hear about outdoor air quality warnings regularly, especially right now with what's happening on the West Coast. I just read a report last week that says that actually some of the toxins in the air there are triggering diabetes in people who are not genetically predisposed to diabetes, because those toxins are actually impacting the epigenetics of the people who are exposed to them. But our indoor air quality is 2 to 5 times worse than our outdoor air quality. That's been shown. And the reason for this is our hidden toxins that we're talking about today. Now, 90% of those hidden toxins actually come from things that you can see and touch. So when I talk about avoiding hypervigilance and anxiety and fear, and avoiding, embracing a mindset of progress over perfection, what we need to realize is that they're not necessarily as mysterious as we might think. And that's actually very empowering. 90% of those hidden toxins actually come from things that you can see and touch, which also means that they come from the products, the finishes, and the furnishings that we in the design industry are bringing into these spaces. So really, I think we have to ask ourselves, what's the real impact? I think that dramatic story of American Airlines helps to tell that quite sensationally, shall we say. But I think we all know that we're all in pursuit of health and well-being. I think you could ask any client on the spectrum, from a commercial client to a residential client, do they care about their health? And absolutely, without fail, the answer will be yes, because we know without our health and well-being, our quality of life suffers greatly. And so I want to cycle back to my own personal story here and tell you about how my own healthy design experience has helped to transform my health. So one of the pieces that I didn't share in my story, I'm going to go back here. One of the pieces I didn't share about my story is early on in my career, I was nicknamed the canary in the design mind. But if you fast forward in my story to about 5 years ago, I was diagnosed by Lyme disease. And I was diagnosed by, I would say he was probably doctor number 28. And he explained to me that with Lyme disease, it produces a lot of biotoxins in the body. And so essentially my toxic load was really high and I couldn't handle anything more, which is why I was having these reactions to all the finishes and furnishings. They weren't just toxic for me. They were, of course, toxic for everyone. But if you think of your toxic load like a bucket, my bucket was very full. Basically, anytime we're exposed to something on a job site, at home, out in the environment, it fills that bucket, and our body's ability to detoxify and metabolize some of these toxins in some of us works better than others, but ultimately we accumulate, we bioaccumulate. So coming back to this piece of my story, just about a year ago, I transformed my own bedroom, and it was the place where unfolded laundry and unfinished projects went to die, I confess. It wasn't so ugly. It wasn't offensive from a design perspective. I had lovely drapery and a headboard, and lovely rug and whatnot. But at the end of the day, it hadn't been designed with thoughtful intention to be a retreat, to be a space that would empower me to wake up with inspiration, a place where I could go to restore my physical and mental well-being, a place for my husband and I to connect. It was missing that piece. And like many of my clients, I had focused on the public spaces in my home instead of starting with my bedroom first. And I've really changed my philosophy on that since doing my own healthy bedroom makeover. This is a little quick look at the space. It was recently featured with House and Home, which I'm very grateful for. And through the process, I diligently detoxified the details as much as I possibly could with the products and finishes and furnishings that were available to me in order to transform this space. And I will say that over the last 15, 16 years of my design career and doing all of this deep dive research, one of the things I learned was that the high-end name brand memory foam mattress that we had purchased years and years previous was actually the toxic equivalent of sleeping on a bed of gasoline. I put it in layman terms like that because, we don't necessarily care about the chemical names. We care about what it's doing to our bodies. And honestly, it was a very comfortable mattress for me. But what I thought I was achieving in relieving pressure on my joints and muscles was actually quietly hijacking my health. And I didn't really realize that until completing this transformation. And what I can tell you is that I have made more gains in my journey to overcome Lyme disease in that year since I have completed my healthy bedroom makeover than I did in the 4 years previous. And that is not a mistake. It's not just an outlier, I think, in the statistics. Circling back to that World Health Organization and that 1/5 of the pie of our health is associated with our interior spaces, I have no doubt that it was a very important step in my journey to completely overcoming Lyme disease. So I want to dive into some of the things that we can do as an industry to start to bring about positive change, to start to inspire our industry to do better. And I mentioned that we talk about, you know, the three-legged stool of what's really beautiful. And so we'll get into a little bit of that here with some of the questions that you can ask your upholsterer. Now, I chose upholstery because there are many layers to the manufacturing of a well-made piece of upholstery, but the reality is that we need to be asking deep dive questions in every category of the products that we are specifying and that we're putting into our own homes. So the first question I would invite you to ask is, what is your sustainability story? And that might feel like a bit of a fluffy question in a way, but what I find is it opens up the dialogue and it helps to identify where a manufacturer is on the spectrum. You're either going to get a bright spark and, you know, an instant response of, oh, I'm so glad you asked that, or you might get the deer in headlights look. But either way, it's not, I find, an aggressive question. I don't find that manufacturers respond to it with any sense of offense, and it opens the door to the conversation. So that's really, I think, where we need to start. And that leads into things like, where do you source your wood? Again, within the upholstery category, we know that for a really well-made piece of furniture, we want to see kiln-dried hardwood frames. That's a baseline. But our baseline really should be that that wood is FSC certified wood. Forestry Sustainability Council certified wood. Because again, going back to our sustainability question, that's about making sure that we are being kind to the planet as we manufacture these goods. Obviously, the kiln-dried frames are also going to last way longer. They're not going to warp, they're not going to crack. So we're also being sustainable when we think about the life cycle of a product, ensuring that it's lasting longer and we're not engaging in fast furniture, so to speak. One of the next questions you can ask, and we kind of touched on this a little bit with one of my questions there for Kieran about the VOCs, is what kind of adhesives are you using? And he talked about with one of their bamboo products. Adhesives are one of the places that hidden health hijackers very often hide. And adhesives are well renowned for containing formaldehyde and VOCs. So it's a really important piece of the puzzle. And we really just want to peel back every layer we possibly can. Next, we want to ask what kind of foam they're using. And if we're honest, again, standard fare are petrochemical based foams. They are bad for the planet, they are bad for the people making the furniture, and they are bad for the people living with them. They do break down over time. Although quite honestly, they can last a very long time. But the kind of breakdown I'm talking about is the breakdown that produces microparticles. And these microparticles become a part of your air. They become a part of the dust on your furniture or on your floor. And this was actually early on discussed around pet health, believe it or not, where vets were discovering that pets were accumulating, they call them bioaccumulators, these chemicals in their tissues, and trying to figure out where they were coming from. They were coming from the dust on the floors. And of course, pets love to, grab scraps off the floor when something falls off the table. And so they're also scooping up all of those microparticles and those biochemicals, or those bioaccumulators, those chemicals that are impacting their health and well-being. Well, I'm sure it's no surprise, if it's impacting the health of your pets, it's also impacting your health. And so we may not be scooping any food up off the floor and consuming it, but those particles are in our air. They're impacting our indoor air quality, which again, we go back to our indoor air quality being 2 to 5 times more toxic than our outdoor air quality, and we understand why it's an issue. Next, we want to talk about flame retardants. They are a major problem in mattresses, in upholstery, even in drapery, and I understand commercially there are certain restrictions based on regulations that we have to, they have to be used in commercial projects. In residential projects, we do not have to be using flame retardants, and we shouldn't. They are absolutely health hijackers. And what's the impact, again, going back to that question? A lot of these hidden toxins are linked to cancer. A lot of them are linked to autoimmune conditions. They're linked to allergies and asthma, and even hormone disruption. I mentioned the study that shows that some of these chemicals in the air are actually impacting sugar metabolism. So if someone is actually struggling with weight loss resistance, this can be one of the culprits. So then we want to ask, what kind of stains and paints and finishes are you using? Again, just looking at every single possible layer. And if they can't offer us information on the VOC content, the formaldehyde content, we need to dig deeper. And the reality is that the most responsible manufacturers will be able to answer these questions for us. And then lastly, just to keep the dialogue going, to keep this dialogue really relational, conversational, and transformational over time, we want to ask, are you open to using alternative materials? And what I've found is that everywhere from very large furniture manufacturers, mega brand names that you would all know, down to small independent workrooms, local workrooms, they're actually surprisingly open to having the conversation. And so I think that that's a part of our responsibility as designers. We really bridge the gap between the manufacturers and the clients, and to educate our manufacturers that there's demand for wellness in the market. Again, no client you ever speak to will say to you, I'm not concerned about my health. And frankly, none of the manufacturers would say that either, I don't think, but we need to really bring this into the conversation more proactively. So I've created a little detox guide for those of you who are new to this whole journey of creating a healthy interior. And this detox guide, Darylyn's going to drop it into the chat box for anybody who wants to grab it. It's 3 simple areas of your home, not areas that I spoke about today actually, that you can start to take steps to create a healthier interior. It will help with your indoor air quality. It will help remove some of these hidden health hijackers that could in fact be compromising your optimal wellness. But for those of you who would say that you're ready to take the next step and you want to go beyond just a few simple tips to really learning how you can implement this in your own home and in your design practice, I have launched a virtual masterclass. It's called the Dwelling Well Healthy Bedroom Design Virtual Masterclass. And it's an 8-module series where I take people through the process of designing a bedroom, starting with my personalized signature process, and then through step-by-step, category by category, learning where the hidden toxins lie and how to remove them. And I'm offering resources so that on a spectrum of price point and style, there are options. My joke is that healthy design does not have to be the style equivalent of wool socks and Birkenstocks. And it used to be. If we're honest, it was really, really hard to find healthy, sustainable products on the market that didn't look like they were made for tree huggers. But we are beyond that now. And I hope my bedroom shows that it's no longer about compromising style for health. We can have both. And that's my goal with this course. And so what I would say for the designers who are listening is that, you know, in order to be really effective lifestyle architects, we need to bring empathy to the table always. It's a key element to the skill set that we have to bring to the table. And in my personal experience with physicians, what I can tell you is the best physicians are the ones who have had their own health journey. And I think the same is true for interiors. The best designers, the best lifestyle architects are the ones who've embarked on their own journey of transformation. And so I would say that this would be a great opportunity to start with your own home, but it will give you the information that you need to start implementing some of these changes in your own design practice as well. And I would love to have you there. So I know Darylyn has dropped the link for the course in the chat box as well. And I did want to leave some time for Q&A. I will say that registration is closing soon, so you'll want to jump on that and secure your spot. But Darylyn, I want to throw it back to you.
Yeah.
Stop sharing my screen here so that we can see each other's beautiful faces and find out if there are any questions for me to answer.
Oh, well, we'll wait and see if anyone does, but I have a personal question.
Yes, of course.
I'm actually in the midst of doing my own home.
Yes.
With my coveted grandmother's mid-century modern couch.
Yes. Yes.
And was recently already reupholstered.
Yes.
To all the information you've shared today. Can you do something like with items like that
Absolutely.
to improve the VOCs, or or other items in the home without having to like reupholster the whole thing, if you want?
Without having to reupholster the whole thing, I would say the answer is no. There are certainly things we can do with case goods. There are some products, well, one in particular that I talk about in the course that can help to seal some of those VOCs in. With upholstered goods, unfortunately not, because again, as you're sitting on it, you're releasing microparticles and dust particles and things are breaking down. I will say that anytime you're purchasing an antique, you're making a sustainable choice. It's an excellent way to reduce your carbon footprint and reduce the impact that you're having on the environment. So I celebrate you for doing that. Yeah. And the other thing is that because of the age of the piece, the likelihood is that if there were formaldehyde and VOCs in the adhesives and the finishes, they've probably finished off gassing by now. Now, that being said, the carpet, yeah, that's, I would hope so, or at least they would be very, very much reduced. Now, that being said, the carpeting that your grandparents probably had along with that sofa, the synthetic fiber carpeting that they would have had, it's probably still off gassing today if it's still around. Yeah. Good, glad to hear it. And this is the thing about synthetic fibers, is that they can off gas literally for decades. But I would say that you know, your frame is probably good. Hopefully you've got 8-way hand tie coiling and that's probably good. But yeah, you would want to get a responsible local workroom to replace the fill and you know, ultimately, hopefully reuse your fabric if it's something that you love. And I would investigate doing that. Yeah.
And a question from Jennifer Anderson. How do you know if your existing furniture is harmful if you can't contact the manufacturer?
Yes, it's a tricky question. So there is something called a FRAT test, which it's a meter that can read the formaldehyde and VOCs that are coming off of a product. It's not something that's readily available or easy to measure. And so what I would say is most manufacturers will have kind of at least some basic information about their manufacturing processes. That becomes much more difficult when we're dealing with offshore furniture, and it's another piece of another conversation around why supporting North American or European made goods is so important, because we have a supply chain. We know you know, the manufacturing supply chain of where those products came from, or the materials came from, in order to create the finished product. So it's one of the reasons why North American made or European made is so important. Does that answer the question?
Sounds good to me. Okay. That answers it, Jennifer. Awesome. Well, we look forward to hearing more about your course, and we really thank you for being here today.
Oh, it's such a privilege and such a pleasure. And you know, I just want to say that, pardon me?
Best of luck with the course.
Thank you so much. My hope is that people are inspired to reach for more, right? For a greater sense of health and well-being, and for even greater impact with practice. So.
That's it. All right, Andrew?
So once again, thank you, Sarah. I'm sure you've unearthed a lot with today's. I've definitely found out a lot. I'm sure everyone else has. Our next TIDC talk is going to be October 20th at noon. We're going to be learning all about curating the best window treatments with Ultralux linens. Make sure to follow us on Instagram. Our unique creators stories are ending for September, but we are very excited to start this week our next theme, which is commercial and home office spaces. So be sure to keep a lookout at Explore TIDC on our Instagram page, and we're excited to share these stories with you.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.